everyone and welcome. It's Dave Bredhauer. Today I'm going to show you a couple of interactive cards that have some movement to them. So let's get started. We're going to use the 30065 Pinpoint Rectangle set from Open Studio. I'm going to be cutting the largest rectangle out of the set into a couple of pieces of white cardstock. You can see the little detail around the edge, and that kind of makes it look a little bit more interesting than just a plain old rectangle. So I've cut a couple of sheets out, and now I'm going to use a snowman panel from Memory Box to cut out the middle of one of these pieces. I'm just going to put that on top, center it as best as I can, and I'll run it through my die cut machine. When that's out, you'll see that there's a whole bunch of open slots, and it leaves sort of a silhouette of a snowman in the middle, and then you can see through all the different slots on the side. It comes out really nice, but if you have any left in the die or in the paper, just use a needle tool to finish getting the rest of it out of there. Now this piece is going to be the front side of our slider card. Basically, we're going to make a pocket here with a front and then a back, and we'll have a space in between that allows us to slip a piece of paper inside to pull it in and out, and you can reveal the pattern through those slots. I'm taking some foam mounting tape and I'm going to cut it into narrow strips. I can get 2, maybe 3 strips out of this foam mount tape, and I just want to put it right along the edge of this panel. Having this one layer of foam mount tape will be just enough to create just the right size slot so we can slip our piece of paper inside. Now you'll notice I'm trying to get it as close to the edge as I possibly can. That will allow enough room in the middle for this piece of paper to slide back and forth. Now on the back side, I'm going to put some glue and glue a piece of red cardstock onto that backside before I symbol the pocket. This is going to be the reveal pattern that you'll see through the slots. And you can put anything back here really, but I chose red because it was nice and graphic and really bold and stood out against the white slots. Make sure that everything's nice and dry, then go ahead and put your second layer on top, and I'm going to cut out a piece of white cardstock that's 3 1/4 inches wide and 5 1/2 inches tall. That's going to be about the right size to fit inside your slot, depending on where you put that foam mounting tape. I'm going to stamp the top of that slider piece with the Merry Christmas Sentiment set from Open Studio. I'm going to use my Misty tool to help me stamp this perfectly. So I'm putting the slider piece in the Misty, and I want to get the Merry Christmas lined up as best I can, and then I'm going to stamp it with some black ink. There's some really fine detail on the font for this Merry Christmas, but since I'm using the stamping tool, I just don't need to have to worry about that at all. It'll stamp it perfectly every time. Now I'm going to test it out inside the slider. You can see that it goes right down the middle of the slot, and when I pull it up and down, it's going to reveal that red background behind. Now the idea of this card is to keep it as plain as possible before they pull the slider out. But I wanted to add a little bit of decoration, so I got my snowman heart collage, and I'm going to use a couple of delicate elements from that piece to decorate this snowman panel. You can see that there's some nose and hats and some little buttons on there. We're just going to use a couple of pieces out of here just to make it kind of interesting. Now I wanted to show you what the snowman heart collage looks like when it's fully assembled. There's a lot of different elements included in this set. You can really get some interesting looks with hats and color and texture. It's really a fun set. But we're just going to use the hat, the eyes, and the nose for this snowman slider card. So I'm going to start by making the hat just with some plain old black cardstock. And when I cut that out, I'm also going to get a couple of eyes. They could be used for eyes or they could be used for buttons, but we're going to use them for eyes here. They're super tiny. So I'm going to use some glue and a needle tool to get those in just the right spot. I'll put a dab of glue down just on his head. That's just the right amount to put that little hat on there. And then I'm going to do the same thing with his eyes. Now again, you could decorate this as much as you wanted to. You could put a scarf on, a vest, more buttons down his side. You could really make it look a lot more detailed than what I'm doing, but I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible. I'm wanting that front to look as plain as I can make it so that the recipient of this card is encouraged to sort of pull on that tag, and when he pulls it out, he'll see that red background. Now I've cut out a little nose, a little carrot nose for the snowman. I'm going to just put a tiny little dot of glue on there, and then I'll use my needle tool to pick it up and put it in just the right spot, just sort of nudge it. And that's all there is to it. You'll finish this off by making the slider out of a photo, a recipe, or you can write your Christmas greeting on the back. For my second card today, I'm going to use the large Sentimental Merry Christmas from Memory Box to create a simple slider card. Now my idea for this card started by wanting to make my little elf jump over some sort of element on the card. And I was looking for different elements that we had in the Memory Box die line, and I saw this big Merry Christmas saying, and it seemed to be just the right size for what I had in mind. I'm going to go ahead and cut that out in white cardstock and then glue the Merry Christmas to the front of a red piece of cardstock cut 4 by 5 1/4 inches wide. Now I played around with my composition a little bit before I got my layout just right. I wanted to make sure that there was enough room between the Merry and the Christmas so that the elf could sort of jump over that T. And I wanted to choose my slider to be just the right shape to fit in that small space. So I'm using my set of slider grooves, and I'm choosing the smallest one, a nice little arched one, and that'll give me a nice little position to make it just jump from one end of the Christmas to the other end of the Christmas. So I'll run that through my die cut machine, get that out of the way, and I'm going to put a little bit of decoration in the upper left corner. I think it needs just a little something up there. It looked a little bit plain. So I'm going to use a holly berry sprig die from Poppystamps. I'm going to cut this out couple different cardstocks. First, I'm going to cut it out of some green cardstock, and I'll use that for the outline and the inner leaf pieces of the die. I'm just going to use my needle tool to push some of that excess out just to get it wiggled out of there. And then I'll use a little bit of glue to glue it in place. Now you could use varying colors of green to make it a little bit more interesting. I kept it a little bit plain here. And I'm just going to use the tiniest little dots of glue to hold things in place. Doesn't take much, it's such a delicate little die. Now while that's drying, I'm going to go ahead and take that die again and run it through the die cut machine with some red glitter cardstock. I'm going to use that to make the 3 little berries that are in the center of the holly die. I'll use my needle tool to punch them out. They're all basically the same size, except one of them has a flat edge, so I want to keep track of that. I'm going to put a tiny little dot right in the center of each die opening, and then I'm going to use my needle tool to pick that up and place them within the hole. Now it is a small amount of glue that you're putting on the paper here, so you want to do this pretty quickly before the glue dries. Just get them in place and keep moving. I'm going to do the same thing for the green leaves that I'm going to put in the holly outline here. You want to keep track of what shapes go where, so I'm just going to put a dot of glue down, then I'm going to find my leaf, stick it in there, and then move on to the next one. And sometimes I can pick it up with my fingers, but most of the time I'm just using my needle tool or some sort of pickup tool to put that into the right spot. Now for my elf, I'm going to use this great set from Memory Box called Christmas Elves. I'm going to use the one elf in here that looks like he's doing a cartwheel. I'm going to place him in the Misty Stamp tool. I'm just going to stamp him out once. If I was going to do a bunch of these, I'd stamp a whole bunch out, but I'm just going to do one for you here. So I'm going to ink it up with an ink that's going to be permanent, that won't get smudged by Copic markers, because I'm going to do my Copic marker coloring here. I stamp him a couple times to get a nice crisp image. And then I'm going to cut him out. There's matching dies to go with this stamp set of the Christmas elves. And once I get that cut out, I'm going to color it in nice and solid with Copic markers. I've listed all the colors that I've used to color him in the materials list below. So I'm just going to play a little music, so you can just watch me color while I color this in, and then we'll get back to the video. Okay, now that I have that all colored in, I'm going to use some pop dots to make the little slider. So I'm using some round pop dots. If I use round pop dots, he's going to swirl and spin a little bit as he's on the slider, as opposed to just a straight piece of foam mounting tape. So with the penny poking through the open slot, I'm going to put the foam mount dot right in the middle of the penny. I'm going to pull off the liner, and then I'm going to stick the elf on him. And I want to find a spot where it covers most of the penny. I'll try there, but the penny showed a little bit. So I'm going to move him down just a tad so that most of that penny is hidden behind the elf. And I want to make sure that it's nice and secure. Then I'll test it, make sure that there's no adhesive sticking along the edge of the slider, make sure that it's going back and forth really easily. Now I'm going to mount this onto my base card, and to do that I need to double up on some foam mounting tape to make sure that there's plenty of space between the front panel of the card and the base of the card so that penny doesn't get stuck on anything. We want there to be plenty of room there so that the penny slides back and forth without getting hung up on anything. So I'm just going to double the foam mounting tape, clip it off, and then I'm going to cut it into strips and use that to line the edges of my panel. Now as you can see, I'm just cutting it up into 2 or 3 different thin strips. They're each doubled up foam mounting tape, and I'm going to line the borders of that panel to make sure that all those edges are popped up. And then with a little bit of extra of that foam mounting tape, I'm going to put some above and below the open slot of the slider just to provide some extra stability for the card so that nothing gets crushed or smashed while you use it. Now once you've made a couple of these slider cards, you'll realize how easy it is to put these together. Just cut out the slider opening, put the penny behind, put your element on the front, and then just make sure that you have plenty of space between the front and the base card so that things move around. I'm just going to peel off those strips to expose all the adhesive, and then I'm going to mount that right onto the base card, and you've got a great little elf jumping over Merry Christmas, and it couldn't be more fun to have an interactive card that you can send to someone special on your list. I think you could recreate this idea over and over with lots of different elements jumping over the Christmas. Thanks for coming. I hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time, keep creating.